Chapter 1, The Silence Before Fire. The stars over Altair 7 looked dead. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the viewing deck of the Draco's Reach, his reflection framed by the black ocean of space. Around the planet, defense satellites blinked in orbit like dying fireflies. Altair 7 had been quiet for hours, too quiet for a frontline planet. And Rourke didn't believe in quiet. His lieutenant, Cale, stepped beside him. No movement from the Accord fleets. But the satellite array picked up a pulse 2 minutes ago. Origin unknown. Elias didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the far side of the planet, where clouds glowed faintly crimson. Something ancient stirred beneath that soil. He could feel it, not in his head, but in his blood. "Have you ever heard of the Flame of Vorn?" Elias asked. Cale blinked. "One of the Earth myths?" "Not a myth," Elias replied. "A warning." Behind them, the bridge flickered with data streams, comms chatter, weapon diagnostics. Normalcy, pretending nothing was wrong. But deep in his gut, Elias knew otherwise. He walked briskly to his quarters, leaving Cale puzzled. The door hissed closed behind him, sealing him into the only space on the ship where truth lived. On the desk lay a black envelope marked Omega Level 0. His grandfather had sent it years ago, just before passing. A war hero turned recluse, the old man never spoke publicly about Earth's past. But behind closed doors, he whispered stories of fire spirits, guardians of old, and the myth wars humanity supposedly forgot. Elias tore the seal open. Inside was a worn page. Ink faded. Edges burnt. It read, "When silence walks before fire, remember, the myths were not written, they were sealed." A chill crawled down his spine. He tapped the ship's terminal. Computer, cross-reference, Flame of Vorn, Earth myths, sealed truth. The AI hummed, pulling declassified data from Earth's forbidden archives. A grainy clip flickered to life, a human soldier in battle, body glowing with golden fractals, shielding civilians before vanishing in a burst of white flame. No weapon. No known tech. This footage was purged, Elias muttered. How did he? Another file appeared, an old voice recording. The Guardians were real. But they demanded silence. Every few generations, one is chosen. The Accord would never understand, they fear what they can't label. He leaned back. His grandfather's voice, barely above a whisper, echoed. Truth wears the mask of myth until it's safe to speak again. The intercom buzzed. Cale's voice was taut. "Commander. You need to see this." A structure just emerged on the planet's surface. Hexagonal. Metallic. It wasn't there an hour ago. Elias moved fast. Back on the bridge, the crew projected the satellite feed. The structure was vast, like a buried obelisk forcing its way upward. Symbols glowed faintly on its sides, none matching Accord alphabets. But Elias recognized them. One matched the shape burned into the envelope. "It's a myth seal," he said aloud. "Sir?" Elias turned to his crew. "Get me down there. Full recon gear. No drones." Cale frowned. "Sir, protocol demands." "Protocol doesn't apply to ghosts," Elias snapped. "This isn't an enemy installation. It's human. Older than our species." The drop shuttle tore through the atmosphere. Storms raged across Altair 7, but the structure pulsed calmly in the eye of the storm, untouched. As if the planet itself bent around it. Elias stepped out onto charred stone, boots crunching ancient ash. Wind howled across the plains. The structure hummed. At its base, an archway flickered to life. Light poured out, illuminating a corridor lined with carvings, human faces in anguish, flames licking at their eyes. A voice, calm, not machine, echoed from inside. "You are Elias. Legacy bearer." His hand hovered over his weapon. "Who are you?" "Flame sealed. Memory kept. Echoes now rise." He stepped forward. The voice didn't frighten him, it felt familiar, as though it had always been there, waiting for him to listen. A stone altar rose from the ground, offering a crystalline shard. Inside it, a flame danced, pulsing with rhythm, like a heartbeat. "Touch it," the voice whispered. Elias hesitated. Then gritted his teeth and reached out. Pain stabbed through his palm. A surge of heat ripped through his chest, his spine, his skull. Images poured into his mind, wars not recorded, beings made of flame and code, humans walking alongside them as brothers in fire. He stumbled back, gasping. His comms crackled to life. "Kale again." "Sir." "Accord fleet just jumped in, 20 destroyers, 5 flagships. They're ordering surrender of all Project Legacy forces. And they're demanding you specifically." Elias stared at the flame, now embedded in his skin like a brand. "They're scared," he said. Kale's voice trembled. "What the hell did you find down there?" Elias looked skyward. "Proof. And prophecy." Chapter 2, The Myth Engine. Commander Elias Rourke stood at the heart of the buried structure, the shard's warmth still pulsing in his palm. His skin throbbed faintly where the flame had marked him. It didn't burn, it moved, as if alive, as if watching. Above, the sky boiled with the arrival of the Accord fleet. Dozens of ships formed a silent ring around Altair 7. Their presence wasn't for diplomacy. It was a noose. Elias stepped back into the light of the storm, his boots dragging ash across the stone. The command shuttle hovered nearby, its bay open, Kale waiting with rifle in hand. "They're not bluffing," Kale warned, eyes scanning the sky. Veiltor himself sent the transmission. "They want you in chains." Elias climbed aboard, face unreadable. "They don't want me. They want what I found." The shuttle lifted off. Below, the relic sealed itself again, vanishing beneath the earth like a secret slipping back into silence. Inside the Draco's reach, the tension was thick. The crew stood silent as Elias entered the command deck. A holographic projection of Supreme Marshal Veiltor flickered above the table, a tall Elvari figure draped in ceremonial armor, his voice ice-cold. "Commander Rourke. You have breached Accord Directive 9A, relinquish control of Project Legacy, surrender the relic, and disband your fleet. Refusal will be considered treason." Elias leaned forward, gaze locked. Directive 9A was built on a lie. You feared what humanity would find. And now, we have. Veiltor's jaw tightened. You discovered a cultural artifact. Nothing more. Myths have no place in military operations. Elias tapped the table. The holofeed shifted to show the glowing shard, the flame of Vorn, embedded in his palm. "Does this look like myth to you?" The Elvari leader paused. For the first time, his expression cracked. Then he spoke calmly, "You activated a myth engine." Kale whispered, "What the hell's a myth engine?" Veiltor answered instead. "A technology developed during the Lost Epoch. Designed to harness emotional memory, fear, belief, history. It fed on the psychological echoes of species. Humans were, particularly susceptible. Your myths were uniquely volatile. So we buried them." The room went dead quiet. Elias's voice dropped. "You erased our memory of the myth wars. Not for peace, but to prevent resurgence." Veiltor's eyes narrowed. "Some truths are too dangerous to allow. You've now made that mistake." The feed cut. Kale turned to Elias, voice shaky. "Sir, that thing in your hand, if it's some kind of psychic reactor." Elias interrupted, "Then we'll use it before they do." He paced to the tactical panel. "We need to expose the myth engine, broadcast the truth across Accord systems before they wipe us out." "Won't work," Kale said. "They'll jam everything." "We don't need comms," Elias replied. "We need memory. Show them what they're afraid of." 3 hours later, the Draco's reach descended to the edge of a blackened ravine where the ship's sensors had picked up a buried myth engine node. Elias's palm burned hotter the closer they got. Kale, suited and armed, led a small team down the slope. The node looked like a broken monument, stone wrapped around alien steel, flickering with glyphs that changed with every glance. "Keep a perimeter," Kale ordered. Elias approached alone. The shard in his hand began to glow brighter, syncing with the node. A deep hum spread through the ground. The air shimmered. Then, reality fractured. The teen gasped as hallucinations took form. Phantom creatures erupted from the dust, serpents of smoke, fire-eyed beasts, and burning silhouettes of forgotten Earth warriors. The myths were alive and angry. One soldier screamed, firing wildly. Another dropped to her knees, whispering her mother's bedtime stories with tears streaming down her face. Kale grabbed Elias. "Make it stop." "I can't," Elias grunted, clutching the shard. "It's not projecting, it's remembering." The myth engine didn't create illusions, it amplified belief. Each soldier's fears, childhood tales, ancestral memory, all brought to life. Suddenly, the phantoms paused. A new figure emerged. Towering, robed in fire, faceless. A guardian. "Elias Rourke," it said in a voice that echoed from within bones, "you carry the flame." The cycle turns again. Elias stepped forward. "What is the cycle?" Silence. Awakening. Fire. Sacrifice. Kale tried to interject, but the Guardian's gaze silenced him. "The Accord is wrong. Myth is not fiction. It is the memory of truth too deep for language. You were never meant to forget." Elias's voice trembled. "Then why seal it?" "Because truth without understanding becomes madness." The Guardian looked skyward. The Accord fleet was descending. "Now they come to kill memory again. You must choose silence or fire." The vision ended. The node collapsed into ash. Back on the Draco's Reach, Elias gathered his officers. "We're uploading the memory burst to our quantum drive," he said. "When the Accord attacks, we jump into their central array for 30 seconds. Long enough to burn it into every system." Kale blinked. "That's a suicide run." "No. It's a fire run." Above Altair 7, the Accord fleet moved into position. Elias stood on the deck, watching the countdown. Kale turned to him. "If this works, they'll never bury us again." Elias nodded, touching the flame mark on his palm. "No one buries fire." Chapter 3, The Last Guardian. Altair 7 was burning. Not from bombardment, yet, but from pressure. The pressure of silence breaking, of memory waking. Inside the Draco's Reach, Commander Elias Rourke stared at the countdown timer, 3:14 until breach run. The ship's fusion core groaned under rerouted strain. They'd never made a direct microjump into a galactic data array before. No one had. It wasn't designed for that. Neither was he. Kale stood beside him, visor raised, expression hard. "Last chance to abort, sir. If we go in there, we don't come back." Elias didn't look at him. "We're not here to come back." Above, the Accord fleet moved like vultures. Flagships aligned their plasma cannons. Every dreadnought had a lock on Draco's Reach. Veiltor hadn't spoken since his warning. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. Inside the tactical bay, Elias held the crystal shard, the flame of Vorn, between his fingers. The glow now bled up his arm, faint veins of light threading beneath his skin. It didn't hurt. It felt inevitable. Kale approached quietly. "If this thing you're carrying really is memory, how do you know it won't destroy the Accord systems instead of sharing it?" Elias shrugged. "Because memory doesn't destroy. It reminds." At T-90 seconds, the ship's AI reported a final confirmation, Myth Pulse payload, encrypted. Memory files attached, visions from the node, Guardian words, echoes of Earth's sealed past. "Patch me through to Veiltor," Elias said. Static buzzed, then cleared. The Supreme Marshal's face appeared, composed, calculating. "Final words, Rourke?" "Yes," Elias said calmly. "You were wrong. You spent centuries silencing the past, thinking it would stay buried. But it never stopped breathing. Veiltor's lip curled. Myths are chains, Commander. They weaken discipline. No, Elias replied. They're roots. You just forgot where you came from. Then, he cut the channel. The timer hit midnight. The Draco's reach jumped, not through space, but into the data lattice of the Accord's central memory hub. For 30 seconds, the ship would exist not as a vessel, but as a signal. A virus of truth. Inside the command deck, the lights flared. The shard in Elias's hand exploded in radiance, engulfing him in a blinding pulse. He didn't scream. He simply closed his eyes. And let it in. Veiltor watched in real time as the fleet systems flickered. The fire began with one ship, its crew collapsing into visions. Then another. And another. Dozens of vessels halted in place, systems overridden not by code, but by memory. Ancient images flooded their comms, Earth warriors burning with golden light, creatures from human folklore standing shoulder to shoulder with soldiers, the flame brand glowing on every battlefield. The Accord didn't know how to fight belief. On the deck of the Draco's Reach, Elias rose, eyes glowing white-hot. He wasn't human anymore. Not fully. His voice echoed through every fleet speaker, uninvited yet unstoppable. The myths you silenced were not stories. They were warnings. And now, they remember themselves. In that instant, half the Accord fleet powered down. Pilots dropped their weapons. Engineers wept at memories they never lived, but somehow knew. Elias walked toward the ship's core, leaving burning footprints across the steel. Kale tried to follow but was stopped by an invisible force. Elias turned one last time. Tell Earth we were never lost. Just forgotten. Then, he stepped into the myth engine's heart. A pulse erupted. Not an explosion, something deeper. A ripple across space and thought. The flame of Vorn spread through the Accord's lattice, not as a weapon, but a mirror. Every system linked to the Accord now carried a memory it couldn't delete. Not a file. A story. One they could never unsee. A day later, silence hovered across Altair 7. Kale stood where the Draco's Reach had once floated. Nothing remained but scorched atmosphere and a trail of golden ash across orbit. The Accord fleet had vanished. Some jumped away. Some never moved again. A distress beacon blinked from the wreckage of a scout ship. Kale activated it. Inside, a final transmission played, a voice preserved like an echo in stone. Elias. To the species that forgot their stories, guard them. They were never fiction. They were shields, warnings, lifelines. You erased your past because you feared what it would ask of you. But now, it remembers you. If you ever see the flame again, don't run. Listen. Years later, no one dared touch Altair 7. It became a silence zone, unmapped, unexplained. But stories spread. Children on alien worlds whispered tales of a human who walked through flame and didn't burn. Academies debated how half the Accord fleet retired within a week of the myth burst. No records explained it. No data matched. But every system held the same encrypted phrase, buried deep in their core memory. The myths were true. Chapter 4, Echoes of Fire. 10 years passed. The Accord never returned to Altair 7. No patrols. No satellites. No claim. The planet remained untouched, a forbidden zone on every star map. Most believed it was haunted. Others said something lived beneath the surface, waiting. But those closest to the war, those who remembered Commander Elias Rourke, called it sacred ground. Kale Varen never left the service. He rose through ranks, but never wore the general's stars. He didn't want them. He carried a different burden, the kind that made medals feel like lies. On the 10th anniversary of the Myth Pulse, Kale returned to Altair 7 alone, in an old scout ship stripped of insignias. Atmospheric entry scorched the hull, but he pushed through. The landing was rough. Always had been. As he stepped onto the cracked surface, ash swirled around his boots. Nothing had grown here. Nothing had moved. Yet everything felt alive. He walked to the last recorded coordinates of the Draco's reach. There was no wreckage. No twisted metal. No trace of its crew. Just a blackened circle in the rock, still warm to the touch. Cale knelt, placed a hand on it. "Rourke," he whispered. The wind shifted. A low hum rolled across the plains. Cale stood. Something shimmered ahead. A shape, faint, like heat haze. He followed it, boots crunching over ancient stone. Symbols began to appear beneath his feet, glyphs glowing faint orange, pulsing with each step. The path led him to a structure buried beneath time. Not the one from 10 years ago. A different one. Smaller. Humble. Like a shrine. He entered. Inside, the walls glowed softly with memory. Not video. Not projection. Echoes. In one corner, a sphere of flame floated mid-air, gentle, pulsing, alive. Cale approached. The flame flickered, then spoke in Elias Rourke's voice. "If you've come this far, then the fire chose you." Cale's breath caught. "I wasn't the last guardian. I was the first to remember. That was my task, to awaken memory, not to become myth. You saw what they did. How they silenced the past to make order feel clean. But stories are messy. They burn." Cale whispered, "You burned everything." "No," the voice answered. "I lit a match. The truth burned everything else." Cale sat on the smooth stone floor, eyes closed, letting the voice wrap around him. "They will come again. Not in fleets, but in questions. In doubt. The Accord cannot survive the memory now seated in its foundation. But it's not my flame anymore. It's yours." The fire dimmed slightly. "Tell the story, Cale. Not the war. Not me. The story. The truth underneath the myths. The part they buried with data. The part that lived in your grandfather's bedtime voice. Truth isn't given. It's remembered." The flame faded to a soft ember. Cale reached out. It did not burn. 3 months later, Cale walked into a lecture hall at the new Terran Academy. Not in uniform. No medals. No salutes. Just a datapad and a name tag, Varen, K. Students looked up, surprised. He started without introduction. 10 years ago, we were told it was a systems error. A freak anomaly. The official report called it a catastrophic data collapse during an unauthorized mission. He paused. But I was there. I saw a man walk into a myth and come out truth. He tapped his pad. Images appeared, glyphs, memory echoes, the old footage from Earth's forbidden archive. And then, one still frame, Elias Rourke, standing in flame, smiling. He told us myths weren't fiction. They were safeguards. Stories encoded in memory. Left for us to find when we were ready. A student raised a hand. "But sir, aren't you afraid? That the Accord will silence you?" Cale's eyes locked on him. "They can't." Another voice. "What if people don't believe you?" Cale smiled faintly. "Truth doesn't need belief. It just needs time." Weeks turned into months. Word spread. Quiet at first, through footnotes, lecture halls, encrypted archives. Then louder. Debate forums. Encrypted podcasts. Underground archives. People started remembering. Not just facts. Feelings. Symbols. Childhood stories that never had a source, but now felt real. Some claimed the fire visited their dreams. Others heard whispers in old languages, long extinct. No one agreed on the details. But they all agreed on one thing. Something had changed. In the Accord Council chamber, Veiltor sat silent. He hadn't spoken in years, not since the Pulse. His advisors whispered, debated, strategized. But he just stared at the flame-shaped scar on his hand. The one he'd hidden. He remembered. On a distant moon, a child drew a symbol in the dirt. When asked what it was, she replied, "A story." "Where'd you hear it?" She smiled. "I didn't. It remembered me."